15 seconds left before we begin. Lord.
Order. Order, please. This is the Subcommittee on International Human Rights of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. This is our
26th of March 2009, and we have two distinguished guests. I will introduce them in a moment, but first I want to take care of a little piece of housekeeping. There will be no meeting on the 28th of April. This is being done because it is the National Day of Mourning for workers killed and injured on the job, and there's simply a conflict. There's an event going on that many members will want to attend at that time. And I just would note, Mr. Marsden indicated that he would speak to this. So, Mr. Marsden, please.
Oh, yes, I really appreciate that, Chair, because this is a National Day of Mourning as proclaimed in the Parliament, and it's all across our country. In Hamilton on that particular day, we have an observance, and there's one here in Ottawa. If any members are interested, if they want to contact my office, there is a bus going to a monument here to mark the occasion. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Now let me turn to our main order of business today. We have two distinguished guests. Dr. Joseph D'Souza is the president of Dalit Freedom Network Canada, and joining him today is Harvey Thiessen, who is the executive director of Operation Mobilization Canada. My understanding is that Dr. D'Souza will have a 10-minute presentation that Mr. Thiessen is here to provide assistance, but does not actually have a formal presentation. Is that correct? That's correct. All right. In that case, Dr. D'Souza, I invite you to begin, please.
Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, I want to thank you for the privilege and honor of testifying before you on a very important subject that is not only related to India and its people, but also to the whole world. We all know that for the past 60 years, India has had a thriving democracy, great institutions of law, a tremendous judiciary, a great executive, and development on many fronts. As an Indian, I'm very proud of the progress that we have made in the last 60 years and where we stand in the Committee of Nations. And very proud of all of the instruments of government that are available for executing law and justice. However, we do have a huge social disease called the caste system, and coming out of the caste system, a group of people formerly known as the untouchables, today known as the Dalits, who have been called human history's longest-standing slaves. Those of us who are aware know that caste is the socio-economic stratification of people in South Asia and in India. Untouchability is a practice that our Constitution outlawed in Article 17, because it's a practice that is so heinous and so deplorable that it consigns 25% of our population by birth to a discriminatory status in society. There are nearly 180 million scheduled caste or untouchables in India, and another 70 million tribals, all of them lumped outside of the caste system and without rights of many kinds. Let me illustrate it for you, the kind of current problem we have with the Dalits in India. 13 Dalits are murdered every week. 6 Dalit homes are burnt every week. 6 Dalits are abducted and kidnapped every day. 3 Dalit women are raped every day. And a crime is committed with impunity against Dalits every 18 minutes in the day. We have stated that when it comes to the issue of modern slavery and degradation of human beings, the Dalits today stand as human history and civilization's last standing slave system. While we have the laws that forbid untouchability, in practice, in the vast amount of cases, there is neither enforcement of the law nor a change in the prejudice and attitude of society, and the fate of these millions continues to become worse as the decades go. Most of you here probably would have seen the Oscar-winning and many award-winning, including the Toronto Film Festival, winning Slumdog Millionaire. Most of the Dalits in India are from the slumdog world. 70% of India at this present time live under less than $1 a day. We have two Indias, the India that's shining and the India of the slumdog millionaire. By and large, a vast percentage of the Dalit people make up the world of the slumdog millionaire. What is particularly terrifying and heartbreaking is that these same Dalits who are untouchables in every way, that is, no access to religious places, no access to drinking water, no access to the village well, a double seating system in schools, discrimination in the workplace, discrimination in the village, every village being 2 villages. These same Dalits are the primary victims of human trafficking in India. I want to point out to this committee that on the issue of human trafficking, India stands as the single largest nation where human trafficking is going on. A 2005 U.S. government State Department report says that India is a source, destination, and transit country for men, women, and children trafficked for the purpose of forced or bonded labor and commercial sexual exploitation. Here is the stark statistic. There are 2.3 million women and girls who are trafficked in India for the sex trade. Out of that, 67% are Dalit women and girls, bought and sold in the sexual trade. When it comes to bonded labor, and bonded slavery, it's very difficult to give the statistics, but Human Rights Watch contends there are anywhere between 20 million to 60 million bonded slaves and laborers in India, mostly children. This problem of untouchability, Dalit discrimination, and caste discrimination has been going on for nearly 2,000 years. A great and noble effort was made by the founding fathers of our nation to deal with this problem, and constitutional banning of untouchability and privileges of affirmative action were given for the Dalits, namely the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. What do we find 60 years on since independence? A minuscule Dalit population has profited from the affirmative action. A minuscule population has found some protection, but for the vast majority, nothing has changed. In a devastating report created by Action Aid in 2005, it showed that 80% of India's villages not only practice but enforce, I repeat, enforce the practice of untouchability. After years of campaign, in 2007, the current Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, became the first Prime Minister to publicly admit in New Delhi in a Dalit conference that the problem of untouchability is equal to the problem of apartheid in South Africa. If you forget whatever I've said today, please do not forget that statement. The problem of untouchability in India is equal to the problem of apartheid in South Africa. The only difference, and the big difference, is far more people are affected with this practice, as I said, 250 million, compared to those millions who suffered under the apartheid system in South Africa. In closing, in this early presentation, I have quotes from two men. One, the father of the Dalit liberation movement, a contemporary of Mahatma Gandhi, who in 1934, writing in the New York Times, said, the world will abolish the problem of slavery as seen in the West, but it will not be that easy to demolish the problem of untouchability. It will take nothing less than the concerted and united opinion of the whole world to bring an end to untouchability, that is India's modern slavery. That's one statement, honorable members of this committee. The other statement is from another parliamentarian in the British Parliament 200 years ago, the man who fought and brought an end to the cross-Atlantic slave trade, William Wilberforce, a contemporary of Prime Minister Pitts. He proclaimed 200 years ago in British Parliament that caste discrimination is a system at war with truth and nature. It is at war with truth. What truth? The equality of all human beings. What is it war with in terms of nature? It denies another human being just on the basis of birth, heredity, and the ensuing occupation, the equal freedoms we all enjoy as human beings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. D'Souza. We will commence with questioning. I'll just mention that in order to make everything fit, I propose we return to our traditional practice of 7-minute first round questions followed by 5 minutes in the second round, and I do encourage members to be as concise as they can be. With that, Professor Collar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Dr. D'Souza for his testimony here today. Dr. D'Souza, I was in Durban for the World Conference Against Racism in 2001. From your biography, I note that you might have been there as well. That conference, as you know, was intended to be a conference against racism and to give expression to the underrepresented cases and causes like that of the Dalits. My own experience was that, in fact, the Dalit cause did not get appropriate representation at Durban. That's my first question, whether you can comment on that. And the second is, given the very compelling evidence that you've provided today regarding the Dalits in terms of the untouchables, slavery, institutionalized discrimination, human trafficking, and the like, why is it that it is such an underrepresented case and cause in the international human rights agenda?
Thank you, sir. You're right. Durban actually was the first kind of any global meeting where Dalits finally managed at least to come and be present, even though they were not given an equal place at the table for discussion. Problem number two has been an ongoing battle with the Indian political establishment, which unfortunately, by and large, for the past 60 years, has represented the interest of the upper caste. On getting into the UN resolution that discrimination by descent, which the UN resolution condemns, should include discrimination based on caste, because caste is an issue that discriminates because of birth, who you are born and where you are born in the caste system. There is not a single Indian anywhere in the world of whatever religion he is who is not born into a particular caste and a caste position. Not a single Indian who does not know where he is born. So that was the Durban conference. And my hope here is that Canada, in its interventions in the United Nations, will take the lead in UN deliberations. Another Durban 2 is taking place soon under the auspices of the new Human Rights Commission, and a review that Canada will take a lead in bringing this issue to the fore. The question that you have asked, why is it, given the size and the scope of the problem, that this has not become the issue it should be? The answer to this simply, sir, is that apart from the last decade and a half, in the global sphere, the Dalits have been completely voiceless. Voiceless. And today, the Dalits of India are asking conscientized Indians of all professions, including politicians, and conscientized global society to please become their voice. And because there is no voice, and because the propaganda machine works in another direction, this knowledge is not known.
3 minutes, Mr. Collar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, as someone who was at Durban and spoke up on behalf of the Dalits there, they were not given a voice, and that was because the World Conference Against Racism in Durban, which was supposed to be the first 21st century conference against racism in the name of human rights, turned into a conference against Israel and Jews. I mention that because the government has taken the decision not to attend Durban 2 because it was going down the same road to be a repeat of Durban 1. So that will not be a forum within which we will be able to make the case and cause. And so my question to you is, are there other arenas or initiatives that you think we should be taking in that regard?
Yes, sir. There is the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination in the UN, the Subcommittee, where a lot of nations have a voice, and that committee has gone into the detail, and in a report released on 9th March 2007, when they called the Indian government before them, they have raised a huge amount of very, very serious concerns. And we would urge that, again, Canada does whatever it can to influence that the recommendations of that committee are followed. India has been asked to come back in a year and to give a report. I read to you a couple of concerns that were raised by the third committee. On point number 13, it says the committee urges India to intensify its efforts to enforce the protection of civil rights, especially in rural areas, including by effectively punishing acts of untouchability, to take effective measures against segregation in public schools, residential segregation, and to ensure equal access for Dalits in places of worship, hospitals, water sources, and any other places of services intended for use by the general public. This is nothing but a blatant description of apartheid in practice, and the urging of this committee of the UN to do something about this. Another one, and I stop there, the committee also urges in point 15 the Indian government to effectively prosecute and punish perpetrators of sexual violence and exploitation of Dalit and tribal women, sanction anyone preventing or discouraging victims from reporting such incidents, including police and other law enforcement officers, take preventive measures such as police training to stop violence against Dalit women and girls. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Monsieur Dorian, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Dorian, please. You have the floor. Thank you. I'll be speaking French, so is that working then? So we are becoming aware through listening to what you said that a significant section of Indian society understands that this practice of untouchability is not well founded. The fathers of Constitution in India, you said that they had entrenched the illegality of this system of untouchability within the Constitution. Why is it then that 60 years after independence, this question still remains outstanding, has not been settled? In what way are, shall we say, superior castes, would they be harmed in any way by the abolishing of the untouchability system? Are there any major economic advantages to maintaining untouchability for them? Or is it simply the weight of religious tradition and cultural tradition?
Thank you, sir. The situation with regards to the Dalit discrimination and their situation, in view of having a constitution that condemned untouchability in its practice, is very similar to what happened in the United States with regards to the problem of racism and blatant slavery. Even though there was a constitution that declared that all men are equal before God, society itself never accepted that ideology but continued to operate on what they believed was the proper ideology, and that is the inequality of human beings. This problem in India is a socio-economic construct. While we have a constitution that states one thing, we have a society that operates and runs on caste mores, caste policies, and caste guidelines. I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say that the problem of caste discrimination, which is unique to India, is been carried by Indians wherever they have gone, including your great nation of Canada. And that's because it is a societal way of looking at fellow human beings. What is the reason why we don't dismantle untouchability when it is in the interest of the nation? That is a question we constantly ask as to why a vast majority of the 250 million Dalits and tribals are still kept in oppressive situations. Yes, definitely there are economic dimensions. If you accept the figure, there are close to anywhere from 40 to 100 million bonded laborers of one kind or another in India. You can imagine the economic profit that cheap labor brings to everybody. And nobody wants to dismantle that system. Secondly, with the emergence of human trafficking and the sexual trade, and the complete vulnerability of Dalit women, girls, boys, and this becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide, again, economics becomes a means of perpetuating the system. I am ashamed, embarrassed, and even heartbroken to inform you, sir, that in the state of Andhra Pradesh where I live, there are villages after villages where you will not find one girl child above the age of 5, because all the girls' child in those Dalit tribal villages have been sold into sexual trafficking. So yes, economics is one reason why this situation continues. And the third thing, sir, is the grab for a slice of the political power in India. The moment the Dalits and the tribals are empowered and they exercise their political rights in their own way, not because some landlord is telling them, the political equations also in the country change. So there are political issues also at play because of which this has continued. And every time, as a previous president said, in recent years, Dalits have tried to assert their rights, there has been a tremendous backlash. In fact, today there is more atrocities against Dalits than there were even before independence. And that atrocity is linked with them trying to assert their rights, and then there is a backlash.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the time has just expired. Okay. Mr. Marston, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, in Hamilton, my own community, we had an organization we called the Strengthen Hamilton Community Initiative. It came out of the firebombing of a Hindu Samaj. I served on that for 3.5 years. And the wonderful part of that tragedy was the bringing together of so many different communities. But one of the things I've learned is that racism is a learned behavior, and that education is probably the only way or the most significant way of dealing with it. Mr. Kotler referred to Durban and what happened there, and you know, it's one of those sad times because the interventions that could have taken place, the report that came out of Durban is in the most part reasonable. The activities that took place outside of there were horrendous, and I think anybody with pauses to think about things at all would be very, very troubled by it. Getting back to in my human rights critic area for the NDP, I'm visited often by by delegations that are from countries in South America, and they're talking often about the paramilitaries, death squads, and things of that nature, and they talk about impunity. So when your remarks, when you first started speaking, you might have noticed that I started taking notes right away because of the fact of the use of that word impunity you don't usually associate with a democracy. And so that was very, very troubling to hear. I would note that we have a copy that's been provided for us of the Universal Periodic Review of India. And I noticed the size of this. The one done in Canada is 5 times thicker than this. And yet you have to wonder what's the difference? Why has that happened in the fashion? Is there something systemic happening, you know? Now, you mentioned, Dr. D'Souza, the propaganda machine. And I think the implication that was there in your remarks was that this is a government machine. So are we saying that the government is involved with the systemic continuation of the caste system?
What I'm saying is there are forces in all of our political parties who, when they come to power, have a hidden agenda of perpetuating the caste system and holding to the caste system, and then giving the spin to the rest of the world that caste system is gone from India. When we began this campaign globally about a dozen years ago, I remember being in front of parliamentarians in Germany, and their defense minister, in the middle of the testimony like this, just blurted out and said, "I thought caste system was abolished at independence by Mahatma Gandhi." And when I had to respond, I said, "Madam, Mahatma Gandhi tried his best. The sad truth is caste system is not demolished, but it is well alive and very strong in modern India."
Well, just, I'm holding in my hands a report, or well, a newspaper report from the Toronto Star that was just in today's Star, coincidentally to this, and it's talking about Kumari Mayawati, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. This is a woman born into the Dalit caste system. And it strikes me, it says to be born into the lowest caste system, she's trying to make history as she stirs controversy. Very much in line with what you're saying to us today. I mean, she was a 53-year-old school teacher who just in that raised herself from the normal expectations of where a Dalit would succeed. What do you think are her chances of actually succeeding?
She is one of the bright spots of current Dalit politics. Herself, she's single, herself a victim of social abuse. So she knows from first hand what it is, not only to be a Dalit, but what it is to be abused as a woman. And she has built in one state, the state of Uttar Pradesh, which has a significant Dalit population and a significant Muslim population, an alliance which now makes her quite a formidable political power in that one state. Given the nature of Indian politics, which is fast replicating what you have in Canada, coalition politics, it looks like, and one can say with certainty, no one party will get majority in the next elections. So in an era of coalition politics, anybody with 30 or 40 MPs in Parliament out of the 550 plus can aspire for a Prime Minister's slot. So that's where that story is coming from.
You really don't hold much?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marsden. Mr. Hebert and Ms. Smith have indicated they would like to divide the 7 minutes that would normally just go to Mr. Hebert, so I'll let you divide it as you see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. D'Souza, for being here today. Dr. D'Souza, many Canadians will be familiar with the challenges of your organization if they've seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire, which you referred to yourself. I'm just wondering, can you tell this committee, is the abuse and the maiming and the trafficking of children and others something that the movie has accurately portrayed, and how common is this situation?
I wrote a blog much before Slumdog became an Oscar-winning and award-winning movie as soon as it came out, because I knew that there would be controversy. And in the blog, I wrote that this is an accurate description of life in India for the 70% majority, and especially for the Dalits and for the tribals. Here is a case that's taken the national attention by storm and stirring up the national conscience. 18 months ago in Nitihari, just outside of Delhi, a business caste person was kidnapping children, and then if they were girls, sexually abusing them. They also sexually abused boys. And then later on, took some of the boys and sold their body parts, and then killed the whole lot and dumped them into a well, which by accident the police recovered and discovered. And then you had parents coming on national television and saying, I came 18 months ago when my child disappeared, and I came and told the police, and the police wouldn't do anything and did not register a case, and now they're telling me my child was one of those kidnapped and killed. This is sadly highly prevalent. There's a recent report, because of the Natihari case and how it's come into the public eye, that in the capital city of New Delhi, daily 6 children go missing. In New Delhi. National non-governmental organizations 2 years ago, when the Natihari story burst out, came up with a figure that India possibly has 1 million missing children. 1 million missing children were kidnapped, abducted, blinded, amputated, sold into the market. What we did was, as Dalit Freedom Network on the Natihari case, we went and wanted to look at what is the caste background of all of the children kidnapped, because we know who are the primary victims. I'm disappointed to report to you that we have on record that 70% of all of these children came from Dalit families. And then the rest came from what is called the low caste, backward caste families, and one family was a Muslim family. There was not a single upper caste victim there.
You mentioned in your testimony that this is a problem that is the world over, and we're focusing on this issue in India, but can you give us any idea to what degree this problem has migrated to Canada?
The human trafficking and the selling of children and abducting or deception of children has become a larger problem, because as the U.S. State Department report says, India is destination and source, and now there is evidence of Indian children and girls being trafficked into the Middle Eastern states, into Burma, into other places, into UK, into US, and even Canada. This story broke out the last year in US, where children were brought, minor children were brought into the home of a rich upper caste family, and they were basically children trafficked, abused, sexually violated, and the whole thing became a media thing and spilled over. And we are extremely concerned now when any Indian couple or family wants to take servants out who are minors outside of India, because this has become a primary conduit of human trafficking across the world. And the children that are taken out through these means, or adopting children, it's a means of trafficking our Dalit children.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to share the balance of my time.
Sure. Ms. Smith, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm so glad that you came today. Your voice here at this committee in Canada means a great deal, because human trafficking is a global concern, and it's one we're addressing here in Canada right now. Having said that, do you have any ideas to how to bring this up to the global conscience radar screen. I'll give you an example. Here in Canada, I was very surprised when I became a parliamentarian that no parliamentarians knew much about human trafficking, and if I hadn't had a policeman's son and if I hadn't been on the streets with the victims, I wouldn't have known either. Now, you're talking about something in India that's gone on for a very, very long time. So have there been any talks at the government level in India and with Canada, United States, about how we could make this awareness come to light? Slumdog, the picture was very, the motion picture that just came out was very, very compelling. And now I believe is a very good time to take action and move forward on it. Do you have any ideas in that area?
There is an increasing amount of material now available in India and many other places about the size and the scope of the problem. I think one idea is to bring awareness to all our lawmakers across the world about the size of this problem. This is not a small issue. Modern slavery, human trafficking is bigger and worse than slavery ever was in South Africa or the United States or 200 years ago when people were taking slaves out of Africa. It is far worse. Far more millions are now being trafficked and sold into modern slavery. Just bringing that awareness and then the appropriate legislation and then intervention in terms of education and getting into those communities. The Honorable Sir said one answer to this is to increase the available resources in providing education for these communities that have no hope for their children.
In terms of the immigration system, often these children from other countries are brought in. We apprehended 6 children. I can't really speak of the case, but in Montreal about 3 weeks ago, they were being flown in from another country. Tell me, what do you think that Canada and other countries could do to ensure that these children coming through our borders are legitimately coming in for the purposes that they are designated to come in for? Because they're coming in droves under false pretenses. These people are accompanying them, and then they're putting them out for sexual exploitation. Do you have any ideas on that?
One principle that we are suggesting is when non-relatives, means a family coming in or whoever coming, somebody who is not related, a child is being brought into the country, that the antecedent research and trail must be done before they're allowed. If you don't do that, where did they come from, who has brought them, what are the certificates, who are your parents, what's your address? In India, this is all abduction. In many places, it's all lies. You come and I'm going to give you a new job, I'll take you to Bombay, but the last thing they know, they are put in the Gulf. And so there's no antecedents, there's no documentation, nothing. So a search and a demand that without proper documentation from where minors are coming, they just cannot bring these children, however wealthy, not being driven by economic competency of somebody who's bringing kids into the country.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that uses up the time. I actually allowed you to go 2 minutes over. Mr. Silva is next, and then Mr. Sweet. But I just want to make the point here that Mr. Hebert is making a statement in the House immediately at 2 p.m., and our 2 guests wanted to go and watch that. So on that basis, I think we have to be quite strict in enforcing the 2 remaining times at 5 minutes each. Mr. Silva,
Thank
please.
you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I should say. The questions of that was raised today are quite important, especially on the issues of human trafficking and child trafficking, because it's something that we're all concerned about wherever it takes place all over the world. And we certainly can't single out any countries because we know this is happening throughout the world, and we even hear cases that even happen here in Canada. So we're very much alarmed and concerned about the whole issue of both human trafficking and child trafficking. When you speak about the untouchables, the Dalits, which you say represent about 180 million people, we know that India is a democracy. It's the world's largest democracy. And 180 million people represents a sizable number of the population and a sizable voting bloc. What is the representation that they have? I was told that there are ministers from the Dalit community as well. So the impression that I'm getting is that they have no voice, but in fact, they do have some voice because they're able to vote in India because it's a democracy.
Yes, we have to accept and admit that the provisions that were given in the Constitution to the Dalits in a variety of areas called reservation or affirmative actions, policies were also given in the political sphere where reserved constituencies were kept for the Dalits, and a certain amount of reserved constituency Dalits are brought into Parliament. And it is also right that there is an emerging strong voice among the Dalits increasingly about their political rights and their social rights within the nation. But compared to the size of the problem, when the government classifies the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes as 250 million people, compare this, sir, as a block versus the 5% Brahmin upper caste in the nation who systematically have ruled every political sphere and party in India for 60 years, and no Dalit party or group has had anywhere near even a 10% political influence in the country for 60 years. So when you look at the caste breakdown and what is playing out in Indian politics, the sad thing is 60 years on after independence, when you have a 25% population that is outcast, discriminated, the political processes should have long led for them to have huge say in governance, huge say in the vehicles of government, etc. They are still fighting, the Dalits in India, including the politicians, are still fighting for a seat in the Supreme Court among the justices, still fighting. And that is the anomaly and the paradox of India. At one level, this is going on. There is the positive side. But at the other side is a social system that is not allowing this to become what it should be. The system is abolished, and there is a level, equal playing field.
I've heard your comments, but you would not characterize it, as you mentioned earlier, but I just want to get a clarification. Would you characterize this whole situation as apartheid? I mean, apartheid has been used somewhat loosely. I mean, the situation, what happened in South Africa, was quite monstrous, hideous situation, which there was, in fact, the blacks were living in slave-like conditions, and they didn't have a voice. They didn't have a voice to exercise themselves electorally. They didn't have a voice in anything at all in terms of mobility and so forth. Would you consider that the same situation for the Dalits in India?
Dalit leaders who came to Durban, sir, in South Africa, carried banners saying, caste is worse than apartheid. And the fact that a running prime minister of the country has compared untouchability to the apartheid, whether it is actually playing out as apartheid played out in South Africa.
Thank you for your remarks, but I just want to be clarified from you. Do you consider it apartheid?
I consider the practice of untouchability worse than apartheid.
That's what I want to know.
Thank you then, Mr. Silva. Our last questioner is Mr. Sweet.
Yes, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. You had mentioned that villages with no girls over 5 years old, and then you mentioned a term, and I just wanted to clarify. You said they were sold into slavery. Are you suggesting that because of years, generations of degradation, that there's also some of the Dalits actually are complicit in keeping their own kin and brothers and sisters captive?
years of degradation and centuries of degradation, etc., has compounded the problem, and a host of issues are at play. And one of the great issues at play is because of a society that does not give equal value to human beings, is the value of the girl child. And so Dalit parents are complicit in selling their children, especially the girl child, because the girl child is a beast of burden.
I have 6 children. I can't even fathom that. I can't approach that at all. You said not a single Indian around the world does not know what caste they're from. Do you think that because in fact some emigrate to the Western society and then deny the fact that there is a caste system, that also worsens the situation?
So the caste system has been shielded. The impact and how the caste system works out, there are children of the upper caste who are shielded from that by their parents and all. And so there is that growing constituency in India, which is largely urban, would say this is not there. But all that they have to do is to move out of their urban context, 30 kilometers outside of Mumbai, 30 kilometers outside of Delhi, and then they find this is at work and where they are. But they know where they are because caste plays one of its pivotal role in marriage. And intercaste marriage between a Dalit and upper caste is such a complex thing. You have had your own case in Canada, that Sikh woman who had her own daughter and her low-caste husband from India murdered because she married intercaste. And this kind of honor killings are going from both sides, the Dalits and the upper caste participating when it comes to marriage. So marriage is where it all plays out, who you marry, and people make sure they marry within that particular caste frame. And anybody who dares then is under threat and under persecution.
Dr. D'Souza, thank you very much. Time is always our enemy here, so I think my estimate is probably you have 60 seconds. But we desire to increase our trade with India. Business people are going to desire to increase their trade. What can Canadian business people do to make sure that they are not complicit in this, to assure that they're factors of ending the problem, not aiding and abetting it?
So we have developed, just as in relation to apartheid in South Africa, the Sullivan principles. We have developed a set of principles called the Ambedkar principles, which I'd be more than happy to send, and you all can have them. And Ambedkar principles guide industries and companies in their association with India, so that when they go out, we want everybody to do a lot of business with India. We need economic development and all of this opening up of the economy, and we can see both the positives and the negatives of globalization. But we want Canadian businesses to be aware when they go out to India that unknowingly they're not perpetuating caste discrimination, and to have in Canadian dealings with America people on board and on committee when they're recruiting, when they're placing, who have knowledge of how this works. And we are not asking at all for affirmative benefits for Dalits. We are just asking for equal opportunity. That's all.
Thank you to both of our witnesses today. I'll just mention to both witnesses, if you do have any documents such as what was just discussed, please submit them to the clerk. He'll ensure that they are translated into both official languages. They can then be circulated to all committee members and become part of our records. That completes our questioning. We've arrived at the end of our time, and given that our witnesses would like to go and see Mr. Hebert's SO 31, which I believe is a statement on the subject of the plight of the Dalits, I'm going to ask them to be escorted up by my assistant, Sarah Lafreniere, and that completes our meeting for today. We are adjourned.